we bring harmony. Where there is strife, may we bring peace. Make this a better world and begin with us. You may be seated. So as I begin my words this morning, I know we've been doing a lot of singing lately, so I ask this question. How many here are familiar with the classic Beatles song, When I'm 64? Good. I don't think this is going to bomb then. For my brothers and me, two of them have passed that age already. One of them, namely me, will be that age in no time, and the other will find it creep up on him before he knows it. The funny thing is, when that song was popular, the four brothers, the four of us, were children. We ranged from 5 to 17. Trust me, none of us gave any thought to what our lives would be like when we would be 64. To be sure, it was just not relevant to any of us at all at that time. I'm sure, even so, we all sang that upbeat refrain when the Beatles sang it and when we heard it, when I'm 64. Sometimes what ran through my mind when I heard that song was that my grandparents were roughly about that age. Recently, I learned that Paul McCartney wrote that melody and its lyrics in the late 60s, 1966, when his father, Jim, had turned 64. That was 1 year short of the mandatory retirement age in the UK. Perhaps that's why McCartney wrote, when I get older, losing my hair, many years from now, will you still be sending me a Valentine? Birthday greetings, bottle of wine. If I've been out to 2:45, would you lock the door? Will you still need me? Will you still feed me when I'm 64? It is that question at the end, after all of these years, that truly now gets to me. It meant absolutely nothing to me back then, but now, wow. Think about this. Now that my three brothers and I are grandparents, those words now, will you still need me, have a lot of meaning to me. What a question. Will you still need me? Just to be clear, I want you all to know something. I'm keeping very, very busy. I'm in pretty good health for an old altacaca like myself. I know of no intentions of retiring anytime soon. Yes, I realize, of course, that the concept of my continuing to work is disappointing many of you here today. But thank God, I have never felt better in my life. Professionally, I still have ideas, the drive and the passion that others tell me they appreciate. I always try to keep an open mind, refusing to allow myself to be trapped in a box. During every discussion I have, regardless of whether it's religious or secular, I try to look at things from every side. The Talmud teaches us to look at the Torah from the top, the bottom, the left, the right, the front, and the back. And I take that lesson very seriously. Sometimes when I start asking questions, others get angry or annoyed with me. They don't want to be challenged. They want me to accept what they say without discussion. If I do, they really do not need me, do they? Anyone can agree with them anytime. And I challenge them because I hear that Beatles song singing, will you still need me? About 20 years ago, a congregant who should rest in peace came to see me about a very difficult personal situation. I listened attentively, emotionally stricken by her story. I even felt tears dripping down my cheeks when she spoke. I could still taste the salt when I think about it. Then, after about 45 minutes, this woman stood up and said, I can't expect you to understand any of this. You haven't even lived yet. Obviously, if I had been 64, perhaps I had been the person that she really needed at that time. Will you still need me when I'm 64? Turns out to be a very interesting question, doesn't it? As I thought about it, I discovered there are three things that determine how much we are needed. The first is how we live our lives from day to day. The second is how we live with every mounting loss. And the third, how we will live on through our legacy. How do we live our lives from day to day? Frankly, you do not have to be 64 to notice that young people waste more time than do older people. Young people have more time to waste. With youth, there is a sense of immortality. They have all the time in the world from their perspective. As the calendar pages turn, they turn even more quickly the older we get. The years slip by faster and faster, signaling that the end is coming sooner than later. The first question God asked Adam was, Ayeka, where are you? God knew that Adam was hiding in the bushes and had eaten the forbidden fruit. God was really asking, where are you in your life? Why didn't you listen to me? That is a question we all have when we read the story. We could all have been living in the Garden of Eden if not for them having listened to that serpent instead of our Creator. Interestingly, I find that the longer we live, the more we ask, why am I here? What is my purpose? When we are younger, the questions are very specific. Where should I go to college? What will be my major? What career path should I take? Who should I marry? Should I marry at all? How many children should I have? Where should I live? What kind of car should I buy? How much is that insurance? What kind of cellular plan do I need? When we reach 64, most of those questions have already been decided. Most often, these were decided for us by circumstance that existed at a given time. We don't like the school, the major, the job. Marriage did not work out. A new opportunity presents itself, and we think we should not miss, but it goes in a different direction than we had hoped it would. The reality is, if we live our lives thinking that the answer to those kinds of questions will create a purposeful, fulfilled life, I can assure you it will only lead to disappointment. Nothing takes more courage than to stand in front of a mirror, look at our lives objectively, and decide if it is time for us to change our course. Think about it for a minute. How would we react if we heard God ask us, where are we? Where are you? Where are you in your life? What kind of an answer would we give? As for me, until I was preparing this Devar Torah, I'm embarrassed to say that I've never really given this question even one moment's thought. Will I be wanted when I'm 64, 74, 84, or God willing, 94? Our society wants us to think that self-worth is tied to status, income, wealth, and material possessions. Judaism teaches that self-worth is measured by being a good person who performs acts of compassion. Generosity is merciful and just and makes others' lives worthwhile. Self-worth is measured by our attitude, gratitude, joy, and our humility. That is the answer to our first question of how we should live our lives from day to day. The second, about how we live and with ever-mounting loss, requires us to be direct and serious with ourselves. This is because Ponce de Leon never found the fountain of youth. Many of us, well, we go to Florida in the winter hoping to just do that, to find it, but trust me, it's not in Boca Raton. The sad fact is, as we age, we experience loss. We experience loss of many, many kinds. And loss is not always death. It happens when our children first move out of the house, sometimes far away. Some for school, some for careers, some make aliyah, some to join the military, some just looking to find that the grass is greener somewhere else. We also feel lost when we're told that our company no longer needs us and lays us off. We feel lost when we become deaf or blind or unable to live without assistance. We feel lost when our loved ones lose their identity to dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and so many other debilitating diseases and conditions. Aging takes its toll on us. We lose the stamina, the strength, the good health that we enjoyed in our youth. As we age, we face death of more and more of our friends, grandparents, parents, aunts, uncles, cousins, and other relatives, our life's partners, and God forbid, our children. As we age, we are reminded that our own days on this earth have an unknown and unpredictable expiration date. Judaism teaches that death is not the end of life. It isn't. It's part of life and guides us with ways to deal with loss. Judaism forces us to face and experience our loss, not to run from it or minimize it. We sadly and gently shovel earth into our loved one that we have lowered into the ground. We cringe when we hear that awful spine-chilling sound of finality. We discuss our departed loved ones during Shiva and talk of nothing else. Even though these practices are over 2,000 years old, modern psychology says that the way Judaism fully embraces loss is preferable to other practices. There's the story of the rabbi who was on his deathbed, surrounded by his family. In a weak voice, he asked his wife to bring him some wine. Puzzled, she did so. The rabbi declared, Borei Peri HaGofen. And then he shouted, L'chaim! The family stood in shock. The rabbi said, I live my life doing my best to fulfill God's will. I did it with a joyous heart. My death, too, is part of God's plan. Why should I not celebrate it? L'chaim! We should apply this attitude to all kinds of loss. While no one welcomes loss, we all know that stuff happens. With life comes all kinds of loss. We must learn to accept it and not to allow it to paralyze us. We can take time to travel, to volunteer for good causes, to raise tzedakah for the needy, to help others who are suffering losses, and we can look for ways to reinvent ourselves. Will you still need me when I'm 64, 74, 84, 94? Now for the question, how about and how we will live on through our legacy? It's not an exercise in narcissism or ego. It's a very, very important question. Martin Buber, the great Jewish philosopher, once wrote, every person born into the world represents something unique. If not, they would not have been born. That is something that many rabbis quote at a baby naming. For me, Buber's premise is even more powerful for those of us entering our later years. What story will be told about our lives, and what will it teach others? Well, the answer is simple. Each of us has a story. That story tells of what we accomplished, what we failed to accomplish, and our values based on the choices that we made during our lives. Everyone here knows, you know me. Unfortunately, I have to deal with so many funerals. I've literally sat with thousands of mourners over the years. And when I ask them who will be eulogizing their loved one, mostly everyone says, I'm not sure. I'm planning to speak, but I might not be able to. I have to find out who else will. Then I ask what their loved one wants them to say. 99% of them answer, I don't know, I have no idea, we never talked about it. In other words, those people's legacy, the legacy of how they want to be remembered, is written sometimes by a rabbi who often has never met with the person. It is based on hearsay that is received between the time when the person passes and when the funeral begins. Now the question becomes, will that legacy be anything close to how that person wants to be remembered? Too many eulogies sound like this. My loved one worked very hard every day, provided for the family, had lots of friends, was a military vet, loved sports, movies, and music, and was a great, great child, parent, spouse, or sibling. In other words, instead of a legacy, we get their resume. Will I be needed? Without a legacy, we do not know if they were ever needed at all. 3 years ago, when my parents of blessed memory passed away, I have to admit that I was frustrated by how much I realized I did not know about my parents. My mother always took a back seat to my father. My father, who survived Iwo Jima and lived with the resulting PTSD, only talked about what was going on right now. Ironically, my father put it in his will that he did not want any of his sons eulogizing him at his funeral because he did not want us to make him into a saint that he did not believe he was. We honored his wish. Each of my brothers and I spoke, though, at our mother's funeral. But in both cases, and I am sure my brothers will agree, we learned more about our parents during our Shiva from their friends, the people that lived with them and knew them best. We learned more from them that we had known or didn't know during our lives with our parents. We learned that during their Shiva. What this means is we must all work to ensure our legacy, that our legacy answers the question that Martin Buber posed. What was the purpose of my life? And after I die, what will I have left behind of value for my children, my descendants, my community that mattered most to me? In other words, the song is wrong. The better question for the song should have been, will I be needed after I'm gone? This reminds me of the famous Talmudic story of Honi. One day he walked by a very elderly man who was planting a carob tree. Honi said to the elderly gentleman, "Kind sir, are you aware that it takes about 70 years for a carob tree to bear its fruit? Do you really think that you will be around to enjoy the fruit of your labors?" The elderly man answered, "I'm very, very well aware of the nature of a carob tree. But just as my parents planted carob trees for me to enjoy, so too am I planting trees for my children." Now, many of us have heard this story, but I wonder how many of us have heard how the story ends. It's the ending that is important because it's the source of the story, Rip Van Winkle. The Talmud continues, after the encounter with the elderly man, Honi had a meal that put him into a deep, deep sleep. During his sleep, a rock somehow surrounded him and covered him up for 70 years. The precise amount of time that it takes for the carob tree to give fruit. When Honi woke up, he saw a man picking carobs from that tree. Honi, unaware of how long he had slept, asked the man, "Kind sir, are you the one who planted this tree?" "Of course not. That was my grandfather," he replied. In other words, the elderly man was needed long after he died. As we are readying for Yizkor, I now ask everyone here to close your eyes for just a moment because you can always see so much more clearly that way. Think about the people who have planted for you. Think of those who have made your lives richer and more fulfilling. Think of those who have been role models for you. Think of those who have been your teachers. Think of those who have helped you figure out what was important in your life. As soon as you're done, reopen your eyes. If the people you were thinking about are still alive, make sure to reach out to them very soon and thank them. If the people you thought of have gone on to their eternal home, give tzedakah in their name and share their stories with others. Finally, out of gratitude to those who planted for us, let us make a commitment to do some planting on our own in the year 5779. Those who follow us in the next generation will enjoy the fruit of what we have planted. Friends, I ask you this. Please plant the seed. Contribute to our Temple Ner Tamid religious school so that we can renew and reap the benefits of the seeds that we plant today long after we are all gone. Matter? Make a difference. We are all needed. Yes, not only will we be needed when we're 64, we will be needed years after we have gone on to receive our eternal reward. Gemar Chatima Tova. May the judge find in your favor for good and for blessing. And let us together say, Amen. Amen. At this time, we will turn to page 569 and begin the Yizkor service. 569, we will be rising, page 569.
Adonai ma'adam v'tedaehu ben enosh v'techashvei